She was treated like a ghost at the gala, a creator made invisible at her own masterpiece. And from the shadows, a man who ran the city's underworld watched her every move with silent intensity. This story will show you that the people who ignore you are not your destiny, and sometimes being truly seen by just one person can change the entire course of your life. Stay with me until the end, and if this story moves you, hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss a story that matters. 1,000 pieces of light from the crystal chandeliers scattered across the polished marble floor. I stood at the very edge of the brilliance, clutching a champagne flute I hadn't even raised to my lips. I watched the tiny bubbles journey upward, a slow and endless climb, because it was far easier than looking at the powerful people who refused to see me. My name is Eleonora Price. The dress I was wearing cost me 3 months of careful saving. It was a simple, elegant column of deep emerald green that ended just above my ankles. I honestly thought it would be enough. I believed that if I just looked the part, if I maintained perfect posture and offered a warm smile, then someone, anyone, would finally see me. I thought someone would finally acknowledge that my presence here was just as valid as theirs. I was profoundly mistaken. The Hartwell Foundation Gala is the crown jewel of New York's charity circuit. Beneath these glittering lights, politicians, movie stars, the city's oldest families, and its newest titans of industry convene to sign checks and whisper promises. I am here because I am one of their employees. As the Foundation's manager of donor relations, my job is to coordinate their generous gifts and make certain every single wealthy patron feels personally valued. I know all their birthdays, the names of their children, and the specific vintages of wine they prefer. For 2 long years, I have carefully cultivated relationships that only truly exist in emails and on official letterhead. But tonight, standing here among them, the cold reality finally settled in. To these people, I am just part of the furniture. I am the helpful woman who handles their calls and dispatches their thank you notes. I am not a person they feel any obligation to recognize. A woman draped in a stunning red gown swept past me without a single word, leaving behind a sharp, expensive trail of perfume. A man in a perfectly tailored tuxedo maneuvered around me as if I were a marble column he needed to avoid. Still, I kept a smile fixed on my face, because that is the most important thing I have learned to do. You smile. You remain pleasant. You never let them know how much it stings. My supervisor, Patricia Caldwell, was holding court by the grand staircase, her laughter echoing as she charmed a circle of donors. She looked absolutely radiant in a silver gown, her diamonds catching the light with every sweep of her hand. She has not made eye contact with me even once this evening. When I first arrived, she offered a vague nod in my general direction before immediately turning her back. I was the one who organized this entire event. I personally confirmed every single guest, planned every table setting, and made sure every last detail was executed flawlessly. But Patricia will be the one to take all of the credit, while I will go home to my tiny apartment, completely alone. I drew in a steadying breath and started moving toward the doors to the terrace. The night air would be chilly, but I needed to feel it. I desperately needed to feel something other than this crushing, silent humiliation. When I stepped outside, the terrace was completely deserted. Far below me, the city sprawled out in all directions, its lights shining like a sea of fallen stars. I carefully placed my untouched champagne flute on the cold stone railing and just closed my eyes. As the wind gently lifted my hair, for just one fleeting moment, I could imagine I was somewhere else entirely, that I was someone else. I am 28 years old. I hold a communications degree from a university that I am still making payments on. My apartment is barely larger than a walk-in closet, and my only roommate is a cat named Darcy, who is most likely curled up asleep on my pillow this very moment. I have fought hard for every single thing I have, which is not very much, but at least it is mine. And yet, standing here on this balcony tonight, I have never felt so insignificant in my entire life. That is when I saw him, As I opened my eyes, he was standing at the far end of the terrace, partially concealed by the deep shadows. I had not seen him when I first came out, but now that I had, it was impossible to look away. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and wore a black suit that fit him with the precision of custom-made armor. His dark hair was swept back from a face that looked as if it were carved from granite. There was an aura about him that made the very air feel different, somehow heavier and charged with electricity. He was watching me. It was not a casual glance or a gaze that was just passing over me on its way to something more captivating. He was studying me with an intensity that made my breath hitch in my throat. His eyes appeared to be a pale gray, though it was difficult to tell for certain in the dim light. They locked with mine for what felt like an eternity, and I felt a sense of exposure I could not begin to explain. I knew I should break contact. I knew I should turn around and go back inside, but something held me in place, pinned by his unwavering stare like a butterfly preserved under glass. And then he began to move. He started walking toward me with a slow, deliberate confidence that belonged to a man who had never been in a hurry in his entire life. Every single step was perfectly measured and controlled. When he finally came to a stop, he was close enough that I could make out the faint silvery scar that traced a line along his jaw. I could see that his eyes were indeed gray, the precise color of a gathering winter storm. "You look as though you would rather be anywhere else in the world," he said. His voice was a low, smooth baritone, laced with an accent I could not immediately identify. It sounded vaguely European, something that made each word he spoke feel like a shared secret. "Is it that obvious?" I heard the words leave my lips. "Only to someone who is actually paying attention." I had no idea how to respond to a statement like that. Absolutely no one had paid any real attention to me for the entire evening. No one, except for this complete stranger who had materialized from the shadows like a figure from a half-forgotten dream. "I just needed some fresh air," I said at last. "It was getting a little crowded in there." "Crowded," he repeated, and the tone of his voice suggested he understood exactly what I was truly saying. It was not about the physical density of people in a room, but about the suffocating weight of being utterly ignored, the deep exhaustion that comes from constantly trying to prove that you matter. "Who are you?" I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. I knew every single donor on the Foundation's comprehensive list. I knew the face of every single person who was supposed to attend tonight, and I did not know his. He tilted his head just slightly, continuing to study me. "Does that really matter?" "You are here at a major charity gala," I countered. "You have to be someone." "Oh, everyone is someone," he replied. "The real question is whether anyone else bothers to notice." His words struck me like a physical blow, gentle but incredibly precise. He had seen it too then. He understood the way these people navigated through their own glittering world, completely blind to anyone who did not serve as a mirror for their own reflection. "I am Eleonora," I said, extending my hand automatically before I could second-guess the impulse. He took it without hesitation. His grip was strong and firm, his palm radiating a comforting warmth against my cold fingers. "Dominic," he said. "Just Dominic, for now." He released my hand, but did not increase the distance between us. He stayed close. He was so close that I could smell his cologne, a dark and complex scent reminiscent of cedarwood and smoke. I knew I should feel uneasy. I should be making some polite excuse and retreating to the relative safety of the crowded ballroom inside. But I did not move an inch. "Why are you out here all alone?" I asked him. "You do not strike me as the type of person who hides." "I am not hiding," he corrected. "I am observing." "Observing what?" His intense gaze held mine. "Everything. Everyone. The ways people show their true selves when they believe no one of consequence is watching." "And what have you observed about me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. For a long moment he was completely silent. Then, very slowly, the corner of his mouth lifted into something that was not quite a smile, but was very close to it. "You are far too good for this room," he said softly, "and you are painfully aware of it. That is the real reason you left." Those words resonated with something deep inside of me, a truth I had spent years trying to bury beneath layers of forced politeness and professional patience. I felt my eyes begin to sting with unshed tears, and I turned my head away quickly, blinking furiously. "I really should go back inside," I said. My own voice sounded foreign to me, thin and fragile. "Should you?" he questioned gently. "I work for the Foundation. I still have responsibilities." "You have already done everything you needed to do. The event is proceeding without a single issue. Trust me, no one will even notice if you decide to stay out here for just a little while longer." "How could you possibly know that?" "Because," he stated simply, "they have not noticed you all night long. Why would they suddenly start now?" It should have been a hurtful thing to hear, having it laid out so plainly. But for some reason, coming from him, it did not sting at all. He was not trying to be cruel. He was simply speaking the truth that everyone else in that ballroom was either too polite or too self-absorbed to ever say aloud. "You noticed," I said quietly, turning back to face him. "Yes. Why?" He was quiet for a long, contemplative moment. When he finally spoke again, his voice was even softer than before. "Because you walked through that room as if you were carrying something incredibly heavy on your shoulders. Everyone else in there was putting on a performance. You were simply trying to survive." I was speechless. I had no idea what to say. I could not comprehend how this total stranger could see me with such perfect clarity when the people I had worked alongside for 2 years could not seem to see me at all. Just then, the terrace doors swung open behind us, and a wave of laughter spilled out into the night air. The fragile moment between us was shattered. I took a small step back, suddenly and acutely aware of how very close we had been standing and for how long we had been talking. "I should go," I repeated, and this time I truly meant it. Dominic gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Then go," he said. "But Eleonora—" I paused, already halfway turned toward the doors. "Do not ever let them make you feel small," he commanded softly. "You deserve to take up space." I offered no response. I could not find the words. I simply walked back into the glittering ballroom, my heart pounding in my chest in a way that had absolutely nothing to do with fear. The remainder of the evening went by in a complete haze. I smiled at all the right people, I nodded at all the right moments, and I counted down the minutes until I could finally make my escape. Patricia delivered a soaring speech, thanking everyone for their incredible generosity. She did not mention my name once. Nobody did. At precisely 11 o'clock, I managed to slip out through a side exit and began my walk to the subway station. The city streets were mostly quiet, and the cold air bit at my skin through my thin coat. I replayed my conversation on the terrace over and over again in my mind, trying to understand why it had shaken me so profoundly. A total stranger had told me that I deserved to take up space, and somehow that single simple sentence felt more significant and validating than 2 entire years of positive performance reviews and polite, impersonal acknowledgments. I do not know who Dominic truly is. I have no idea why he was watching me, or why he made the choice to speak to me out of everyone there. But I cannot shake the distinct feeling that something fundamental has shifted inside of me, that tonight marked the very beginning of something I cannot yet begin to comprehend. When I finally made it back to my apartment, Darcy was waiting right by the door, meowing to voice his displeasure at how late I had returned. I scooped him up into my arms and held him tight, burying my face into the softness of his fur. "I met someone tonight," I whispered to him, "and I have no idea what it means." Darcy just purred, entirely unimpressed by my dramatic confession. I set him down gently and walked over to my window, looking out at the vast expanse of city lights below. Somewhere out there, In one of those gleaming, distant towers, Dominic was probably looking out at the same view, or perhaps he had already forgotten all about me. Maybe I was nothing more than a momentary diversion, just some sad-looking woman on a terrace. But deep down, I did not believe that. The way he had looked at me, the way he had seen me, that was not a distraction. That was a beginning. The way he spoke was deliberate, filled with an unspoken purpose that I could not begin to guess. Back in my apartment, I slip out of my formal dress, hanging it with care inside the closet's quiet darkness. I move through the nightly rituals of washing my face and brushing my teeth, performing a perfect imitation of a normal evening. But when I finally settle into my bed, sleep is a distant shore I cannot reach. His eyes are imprinted on my mind, the color of a gathering storm, the shade of polished steel, the edge of something sharp enough to dismantle every defense I have ever constructed around my heart. After being treated like a ghost at that gala, I left with my dignity intact. But I was not the same person. And I know, somewhere in this sprawling city, the man who truly saw me is waiting. If you want to hear stories like this, make sure you are subscribed to our channel. These narratives are designed to make you feel acknowledged, deeply understood, and emotionally connected. If you have ever felt like you were invisible, this is a sanctuary where your feelings are the main character. Subscribe to our channel now and join a community that truly believes stories have the power to mend and reshape us. 3 full days come and go, and I dutifully return to my job. I manage my inbox, I arrange schedules, and I act as if my world has not been completely tilted on its axis. Patricia offers a curt thank you for my efforts on the gala, her gaze fixed somewhere over my shoulder as she immediately pivots to the details of our next major event. I just nod and smile, taking notes with the mechanical precision of the professional I am paid to be. But a fundamental shift has occurred inside me. I can feel it in the way I stand a little taller, in the bold questions that echo in my mind in the quiet of the night. Do I have a right to exist here? Have I spent years shrinking myself down without even noticing? The stranger's voice plays on a loop in my memory, a melody I cannot shake. Then, on Thursday afternoon, a package is delivered directly to my desk. It holds a single perfect white rose standing in a slender crystal vase, with a small heavy stock envelope resting beside it. My cubicle neighbor, Jennifer, peeks over the partition, her eyebrows arched in curiosity. Is that from a secret admirer? I highly doubt that, I reply, but my hands are not entirely steady as I carefully break the seal on the envelope. The card inside holds just 2 words, inscribed in a confident, elegant hand. Take space. There is no signature, not even an initial, but a jolt of recognition tells me exactly who it's from. For the rest of the workday, I try to concentrate on spreadsheets and reports, but my thoughts are a river flowing in one direction, straight to Dominic. Who is this man? How could he possibly have found out where I work? And what is his reason for contacting me now, so many days after that short, intense conversation on the balcony? Later that evening, just as I am packing up to leave the office, my phone vibrates with a message from a number I do not recognize. There is a place on Madison and 53rd named Lucia. I will be there at 8. Come if you want answers. Stay home if you are afraid. I find myself staring at the screen for a very long time. Every ounce of logic and self-preservation in my mind screams at me not to go. I know nothing about this man or what he is capable of. Meeting a complete stranger in a city as vast as New York is the opening scene of every horror story I have ever been told. But there is another voice inside me, a part of myself that I have silenced for years, that is desperate for answers. It needs to know why this powerful man noticed me when everyone else looked right through me. So I go home. I change my clothes, choosing a simple black dress. It is not extravagant, just an outfit that makes me feel grounded in who I am. I give Darcy his dinner, tell him I might be late, and then I summon a car to take me to Madison Avenue. Lucia is not at all what I imagined. From the street, it appears to be just another high-end Italian restaurant, filled with the glow of warm lights and rows of pristine white tablecloths. But the moment I walk through the door, I sense it is a different kind of place entirely. The host greets me by name, before I have a chance to say a word, and then guides me past the main dining area into a secluded private section at the very back. Dominic is already waiting, seated at a corner table with a view of the city. He stands as I approach, and I am once again overwhelmed by his sheer presence. He commands the space around him without any effort at all. "You decided to come," he states. "I told you I was curious. Not afraid. Well, maybe a little, I confess, but my curiosity was stronger." He motions toward the empty chair across from his, and I take my seat. A waiter materializes out of nowhere, pouring chilled water into our glasses and presenting menus with a practiced, silent grace. As soon as the waiter disappears, Dominic fixes me with that same piercing gaze I remember from the gala. "You are trying to figure out who I am," he says. "It is a statement, not a question." "That is one of many things," I reply. I take a steadying breath. "The gala. You were not on the official guest list. I looked for your name." "No, I was not," he confirms. "So how did you manage to get in?" "I get in anywhere I want to be," he says, by making it obvious that I am not someone who can be stopped. It should sound like an incredibly arrogant thing to say, but his tone is completely matter of fact. He is just telling me how his world works, and for some reason, I believe every word he says. "What is it that you do?" I ask him. "What kind of business are you in?" "I am in many different businesses: property development, global shipping, private investments." That answer is intentionally vague. It is also completely honest. The specific details would require much more than a single dinner to properly explain. I examine his face, searching for any sign of dishonesty, but all I find is an unnerving, calm certainty. Whatever Dominic's work is, he approaches it with absolute self-assurance. "So why did you ask me to meet you here?" "Because I have not been able to stop thinking about you." His directness is disarming. It sends a flush of heat creeping up my neck, and I have to look down at my hands, suddenly finding it impossible to hold his gaze. That is a very forward thing to say to a person you have only just met. Have no time for games. I prefer the truth. Life is far too brief to waste it on pretending. When I finally dare to look up, he is still observing me, waiting for me to speak. There is no hint of pressure in his expression, only a quiet and profound patience. It is clear he will wait as long as necessary for me to decide what I want to do. "Tell me something real," I say, my voice steadier than I feel. "Tell me something that truly matters." He pauses to consider my request. Then he leans back slightly in his seat, and a subtle change comes over his features, a softening around his eyes. My mother passed away when I was 12 years old. She was the only one who ever made me feel completely safe in the world. After she was gone, I made a vow to myself that I would never be powerless again. Every single choice I have made from that day forward has been about maintaining control, about making sure that no one could ever again take anything from me that I was not ready to let go of. His words settle in the space between us, feeling heavy and profoundly real. I never imagined he would answer with such raw honesty. I was not even sure he would answer my question at all. "I am so sorry," I say softly, "about your mother." "It happened a very long time ago," he says, "but some wounds never quite disappear." "No, they certainly do not." He tilts his head slightly, his eyes studying me with renewed focus. "You know what that is like, do you not?" It is not a question. It is a statement of fact. He has perceived something essential in me, just as I have seen something essential in him. We are two people defined by what we have lost, building fortifications to keep out any future pain. My father left us when I was 8. I hear the words coming from my own mouth. One day he was making breakfast, and the next, he had vanished. He left no letter, no goodbye. My mother never truly got over it. She drove herself to utter exhaustion working to keep us afloat. And then when I turned 16, her overworked heart just stopped. I have been completely on my own since that day. I have no idea why I am telling him these things. It has been years since I spoke of my parents to anyone. But something about this man, in this moment, makes the story spill out of me like a river bursting through a dam. You built an entire life from absolutely nothing, Dominic observes, and you accomplished it all by yourself. I did not really have another option. There is always an option, he counters. You could have surrendered to despair. You could have allowed yourself to become angry and bitter. Instead, you chose to keep your heart from closing. That requires a special kind of courage. I feel the sting of tears behind my eyes and blink hard to force them away. I refuse to cry in front of this man who seems to see right through me. Why me? The question leaves my lips before I can stop it. With everyone at that glamorous party, what made you see me? Dominic's answer was simple. Because you were the only one not wearing a mask. Everyone else was playing a part, but you were just there, fighting to get through the night. I saw that in you because I was once the same way. A long time ago. Now I know how to play the game when I have to, but I always remember what is genuine. Just then, our server reappears with our meals, shattering the raw connection between us. We ate without speaking, but the quiet was easy and relaxed. To my own surprise, my anxiety had not erased my appetite. The pasta was incredible, and the red wine felt like liquid warmth. After the meal, Dominic was firm about covering the check, and I chose not to resist. A part of me knew that arguing would just draw things out, and I was simply too exhausted for any more debates. Stepping outside, the night air hit us, sharp and clean. The city's glow erased the stars from the sky, but a lifelong habit made me search the empty darkness for them anyway. Dominic's voice was low when he spoke. "Let me take you home." "I can get a ride share," I replied. "I am aware of that," he said gently, "but I am asking for your permission to drive you." My first instinct was to say no. I thought about keeping my walls up, shielding myself from this new, intense connection. But the truth was, I was tired of being alone. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I actually wanted to open the door, even just a little. "Okay." The word came out as a soft breath. His car was already there at the curb, a vision of polished black steel and luxury. A chauffeur held the door open, and I slipped inside. The scent of rich leather filled the space, and I was intensely conscious of Dominic's presence so near me in the back seat. The journey to my building passed in a comfortable silence. He did not does not attempt to make meaningless conversation, and I am deeply grateful for it. When we pull up, he gets out and walks me all the way to the front door of my building. "Thank you for this evening," I tell him. I did not expect any part of it. A genuine smile touches his lips, and it completely alters his serious expression. For just a second, the hard edges vanish, and I can almost see the young boy he once was, before grief sharpened him into the man he is today. "Neither did I," he admits, "but I am very glad you came." He makes no move to kiss me. He does not ask if he can come inside. Instead, he gently takes my hand and brings my knuckles to his lips, a gesture so respectful and old-fashioned it takes my breath away, before he steps back. "Good night, Elena. Good night, Dominic." I stand there and watch him get back into his car, my eyes following the red taillights as they fade around the distant corner. Only then do I turn to go inside, climbing the familiar stairs to my apartment, where I finally let out the breath I feel like I have been holding all night long. He told me the story of building his entire world from the ground up, detailing the immense sacrifices and the dangerous rivals he acquired over the years. He did not shy away from the ruthless aspects of his history, but he did not glorify them either. He presented them as necessary choices on the path to survival. In turn, I told him about my own path, about juggling several jobs to pay for my own education, about the profound loneliness of celebrating major life achievements with no family to share them with. I explained how I learned to find solace in simple comforts, like a captivating book, a hot cup of tea, or the comforting weight of Darcy sleeping on my lap. We are two souls who, on the surface, should share no common ground, yet we connect on a level that bypasses all logic. It feels as if he can look right through my carefully constructed walls, as if they were nothing more than panes of clear glass. I can see right through him, as if his secrets are just shadows and smoke. Yet there are specific things he carefully keeps from me, details I have only started to assemble as the weeks have turned into a month. His phone vibrates without end, and he always finds a reason to step away, taking his calls where I cannot hear. Then there are the men, the ones who materialize wherever we happen to be. They watch us from across the street or from a distant table, never getting close. But their presence is a constant, silent hum. The way waiters and hotel managers treat him is not the usual polite service for a wealthy client. It is something much deeper, an attitude that borders on genuine fear. I have not asked him about any of this, not yet. I keep telling myself that every person is entitled to their secrets, that I have no right to demand the full truth from a man I have known for such a short time. But the questions are growing louder in my mind, a storm gathering on the horizon that I know I will eventually have to confront. One evening, as we are strolling alongside the Hudson River, Dominic comes to an abrupt halt. His entire expression shifts, becoming hard and unreadable, and he pulls me firmly but gently toward the curb. "What is happening?" I manage to ask. "We have to go. Right now." Before I can even form another question, a sleek black car glides to a stop beside us. A door swings open, and Dominic urges me inside with a steady hand on the small of my back. Only seconds later, the car is accelerating through the city streets. Our driver handles every sharp turn with a fluid, practiced skill that speaks of long experience. "Dominic, what is going on?" He does not reply right away. His jaw is clenched, and his eyes are methodically scanning everything we pass through the dark-tinted windows. When he finally does speak, his voice is a low, controlled wave of urgency. "There are certain people in this city who are not pleased with my presence here. Every so often, they decide to make their displeasure known in obvious ways." "What kind of people are we talking about?" I ask, my voice trembling slightly. "The kind of people who think that violence is a perfectly acceptable tool for negotiation." My heart begins to hammer against my ribs. I had my suspicions, of course. All the individual pieces were scattered in front of me, just waiting for me to put the puzzle together. But hearing him say it so directly makes the danger feel real in a way that my own quiet doubts never could. "Are you involved in illegal activities?" He finally meets my gaze, and I can see a deep sense of resignation in his eyes. "I am involved in a great many things, Elenina. Some of those things operate in legal gray areas, and some of them absolutely do not." That is not a real answer. It is the only answer I am able to give you at this moment. Once we are somewhere secure, I promise I will explain everything. But for right now, in this car, I absolutely need you to trust me. Trust. It is such a simple word for such an impossibly complicated demand. This man, this near stranger, is asking me to put my entire life into his hands. He wants me to believe that he can shield me from threats that I cannot even begin to comprehend. And yet, when I truly look at him, I do not see a monster. I see the man who told me I had every right to take up space in this world. I see the man who held my hand so gently and listened to every story I told. I see the man who, for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, has made me feel completely seen. "I trust you," I say, and the words feel true. A flicker of profound relief washes over his face before it is replaced by a mask of intense determination. He takes my hand in his grip tight and reassuring as our car continues its race through the dark city. We arrive at a building I have never seen before, a modern skyscraper of glass and steel located in a part of the city I almost never go to. Dominic guides me through a private side entrance, leading me past security guards who simply nod at him without a single question. We step into an elevator that will not move without a special key card. The apartment that occupies the entire top floor is immense, a palace of polished chrome and stone with views that steal my breath away. But I hardly register the opulence around me. My entire focus is on Dominic, on the raw tension that radiates from him like heat. "You will be safe in this place," he says, his voice low. "No one will be able to get to you here." "And what about you?" I ask. "Are you safe?" A faint smile touches his lips, but it holds no warmth at all. "I have made it through far worse than this." That did not answer my question. I know it did not. He walks over to the vast window, staring down at the sprawling city lights below. For a very long moment, the only sound is the quiet hum of the building around us. Then, without turning to face me, he finally begins to speak. "My family has been involved in certain types of businesses for many generations. When my mother passed away, my grandmother pleaded with me to leave this life, to go somewhere else and start over, somewhere clean. But I was filled with rage. I wanted to take revenge on the world that had stolen her away from me. So I chose to stay. I learned the business. I climbed the ladder. I rose through the ranks. The Mafia," I whisper. The word has crossed my mind before, but this is the first time I have ever dared to speak it aloud. That is one of the names they call it. There are others. What is important is that I am a powerful man, and power always creates enemies. Tonight, one of those enemies chose to send me a clear message. What kind of message? He finally turns around to look directly at me. "The kind of message that tells me they know all about you." His words strike me with the force of a physical blow. I instinctively take a step backward, my hand reaching out to touch the cold wall for support. "Me? Why on earth would anyone care about me?" "Because I care so much about you. And in the world I live in, that makes you an extremely valuable target." My mind flashes back to the gala, to the invisible woman I was, standing alone on that terrace. I think of the single perfect rose left on my desk, the incredible dinners, the deep conversations, and all the small, quiet moments of connection we have shared. I think about how carefully, how methodically this man has woven himself into my life. Did you know that this was going to happen? I knew that it was a distinct possibility. I was just hoping I would have had more time. More time for what? To properly show you every part of who I am. To give you the chance to decide for yourself if a man like me is worth this kind of risk. I can only stare at him, this complicated man who has completely shattered and rebuilt my world in just a few short weeks. I know I should be furious with him. I should be demanding detailed answers, concrete explanations, and absolute guarantees that he can protect me from the storm he has personally dragged into my life. But anger is not what I am feeling. What I feel is something infinitely more complex, something far more dangerous. "I already made my decision," I tell him quietly. "That very first night we met on the terrace, something deep inside me recognized a kindred spirit in you. I could not understand it at the time. I am not even sure I fully understand it right now. But what I do know is that whatever this connection between us is, I am not prepared to walk away from it." In 3 long strides, Dominic crosses the distance between us. He gently takes my face between his large hands, his intense eyes searching mine for any sign of doubt, any hint of fear, for anything at all that might suggest I do not mean every word I just said. He must not have found it, because the very next thing I know, his mouth is on mine. The kiss is nothing like I expected. It is not gentle or tentative. It is fierce and desperate, filled with all the unspoken words and emotions that have been building between us. I clutch his shoulders, pulling him even closer, wanting all of him, needing this connection, needing him. When we finally break away from each other, we are both breathing heavily. He rests his forehead against mine, his hands still framing my face as if I were something precious. "I will always protect you," he says, his voice a raw promise. "It does not matter what it costs me. and it does not matter what I have to do. You belong to me now, Elenina, and I never let go of what is mine. The raw possessiveness in his tone should probably frighten me. Instead, it wraps around me like a shield, making me feel safer than I have ever felt in my entire life. Then do not ever let go, I whisper back to him, and he does not. The next several weeks pass by in a strange kind of blur, a life suspended between two entirely different worlds. There is the existence I knew before Dominic, the one with my steady job at the foundation, my small apartment, and the quiet, lonely routine of just getting by. Then there is the new life I am slowly building with him, a world overflowing with breathtaking luxury, constant danger, and powerful emotions that I am only just beginning to understand how to name. I continue to go to my job at the foundation, even though I know deep down that it is only a matter of time before it has to end. Patricia has already started to notice how distracted I have become, the way I constantly check my phone during meetings, the new habit I have of leaving exactly at 5 o'clock instead of working late. She has not confronted me about it directly, but I can feel her silent disapproval like a cold draft. Dominic insists that I have security. Two men now follow me everywhere I go, always discreet but undeniably present. They wait patiently in the lobby of my office building. They drive me to and from work in a town car, and they stand guard outside my apartment building all through the night. I know I should resent this constant intrusion into my privacy, but I have surprisingly come to appreciate their quiet, unwavering protection. The dangerous situation with Dominic's rivals remains incredibly tense. He refuses to share the specific details with me, always saying that he wants to keep his business and his personal life completely separate. But I can clearly see the heavy toll it is taking on him. I see it in the late nights he keeps, I hear it in the whispered, urgent phone calls, and I see it in the way his broad shoulders seem to carry a weight that gets heavier with each passing day. One evening, while I am staying at his penthouse, he gets a call that instantly drains all the color from his face. He listens intently without saying a single word, then ends the call and turns to me with a dark expression I have never seen on him before. I have to leave the city for a couple of days, he states, his voice flat. It is business that cannot be conducted over the phone. What sort of business? The kind that I cannot tell you about. Not at this moment. I desperately want to argue with him, to demand the transparency he promised, but I can see the immense strain etched around his eyes. Whatever is happening, it is deadly serious. Pushing him for answers right now would only make everything worse. Just be careful, is all I say instead. He walks across the room and gathers me into his arms, holding me so tightly I can barely breathe. I will come back to you, Elenina. I give you my word. You had better. He kisses me then, slow and deep and thorough, as if he is trying to memorize the exact feel of my lips against his. A moment later he is gone, and I am left standing alone in his enormous, silent apartment, surrounded by every imaginable luxury, but feeling more empty than I have in months. The days that drag on after he leaves are easily the longest and most difficult of my life. Dominic sends text messages whenever he gets a chance, short, cryptic updates that manage to tell me nothing and everything all at once. I am safe. I am thinking of you. I will be back soon. To keep my mind occupied, I pour all of my energy into work, trying to fill the empty hours with something meaningful and productive. The foundation is in the process of launching a new initiative, a scholarship program designed for underprivileged students, and I volunteer to take the lead on all the outreach efforts. The project gives me a clear sense of purpose, a solid reason to get out of bed each morning. But every night when I am alone in my quiet apartment, the crushing worry returns with a vengeance. I imagine 1,000 different terrible scenarios, each one worse than the last. What if something awful happens to him? What if he is not able to come back to me at all? Then, on the fourth day, I am startled by a call from a number I do not recognize. When I hesitantly answer, the voice that speaks on the other end is definitely not Dominic's. Miss Price, I do not believe we have had the pleasure of meeting, but I assure you, I know a great deal about you." The man's voice is cold and unnervingly smooth, carrying an accent that is very similar to Dominic's. But where Dominic's accent is warm and inviting, this man's is sharp and coated in danger. Who is this? A friend of Dominic's, you might say. Or perhaps, more accurately, a former friend. These kinds of relationships can be so complicated. My fingers tighten their grip on my phone. What is it that you want? For now, I only wish to introduce myself. My name is Victor Moretti. Dominic and I share a very long and detailed history together, though I have a strong suspicion he has neglected to tell you about me. He has neglected to tell me about a lot of things. No, I imagine he has not. He has always been careful about the information he reveals. It is one of his most maddening traits. I should end this call right now. I should contact Dominic's security detail and tell them everything. Yet something holds me on the line. A deep-seated need to understand is overpowering my own fear. So I ask, "Why did you choose to call me?" He answers, "Because you need to understand exactly what you have stumbled into, Miss Price. Dominic is not the hero he appears to be in your eyes. He has committed unspeakable acts in his climb to the top. He has done things that would send you screaming into the night if you ever learned the whole truth. Everyone has a complicated past. That is true. But not everyone's history involves removing rivals, shattering entire families, and constructing an empire built on the misery of countless others. Dominic might dress in expensive clothes and whisper words of love, but beneath that polished surface, he is a hunter. And hunters never truly change their nature. They only move on to new targets. His words are crafted to inflict pain, and they find their mark perfectly. My mind flashes to Dominic's gentle caresses, his soft-spoken promises, the incredible way he makes me feel protected and truly seen. Could the man who provides that comfort also be capable of the monstrous acts this stranger is describing? "Why are you the one telling me this?" He replies, "Because I think you have a right to know the truth, and also because Dominic possesses something of mine, something I fully intend to take back from him." What on earth could he have that is rightfully yours? Victor lets out a laugh, a chilling sound completely empty of any real warmth. Just ask him about the Corsetti family fortune, and while you are at it, ask him what really became of my brother. After that, you will finally understand everything. The connection ends abruptly. I remain completely still in my apartment, the phone feeling like a block of ice pressed against my skin. My thoughts are a chaotic storm, trying to sift through Victor's statements, desperate to distinguish the truth from the poison. He is without a doubt an enemy, a person who wants to see Dominic fall. But what if there is a foundation of fact beneath his bitter accusations? What if the man I am giving my heart to is genuinely capable of these terrible deeds? I know I cannot find these answers by myself. I must confront Dominic, but Dominic is away, and in his absence, I am left with a suffocating cloud of doubt and nothing more. That night, sleep never comes. I just sit by the large window, watching the distant city lights flicker, and I think about all the things I know for sure and the vast ocean of things I do not. I think about the glamorous Gala, our conversation on the terrace, the mysterious man who noticed me when I felt invisible. I think about the single rose he left on my desk, the intimate dinners, the breathless kisses, the profound sense of security I feel wrapped in his arms. Then I think about what it truly means to love a man whose entire existence is built within the shadows. If you are feeling the intensity of this moment, if Elena's impossible situation resonates with you, please leave a comment that says, "Love is worth the risk." It would mean so much to know you are sharing this emotional journey with me. When Dominic finally returns 5 days later, I can tell instantly that something is different. There is a deep weariness in his eyes that I have never seen before, and a new heaviness burdens his every move. "It is finished," he says simply when I ask how his trip went. "The whole situation has been handled." Handled in what way? He gazes at me for a very long moment, and I can almost see him calculating his response, deciding just how much of the truth I am ready to hear. He says, "There were individuals who sought to undermine my position of authority. They have since been convinced to change their minds." Convinced? Yes. I feel a strong urge to demand more details, but the chilling memory of Victor's phone call paralyzes me. If I bring up the Corsetti fortune, or ask about his brother, he will know I have been speaking with his rivals, and I have no idea how he might react to such a betrayal. So, I choose to ask a different question instead. Someone called my apartment while you were out of town. A man who identified himself as Victor Moretti. The warmth in Dominic's expression vanishes in an instant. What did he tell you? He told me that you have done awful things, that you are not the person that you pretend to be. And do you believe what he said? I draw a steadying breath. I do not know what I should believe. The only thing I am certain of is what I have shared with you. And what has that been? It has been overwhelming and confusing and absolutely beautiful. I see a fraction of the tension ease from his powerful shoulders. He crosses the spacious room in a few strides and takes both of my hands into his. Victor is my cousin. We were raised in the same house. We trained side by side. We were meant to inherit the family business together. But when the day came to name a new leader, the family council chose me. Victor has never been able to forgive that decision. He holds me responsible for every single thing that has ever gone wrong in his life. He claimed you were responsible for his brother's ruin. Dominic's jaw clenches tightly at my words. His brother, Marco, attempted to seize control of our entire organization through brute force. He made direct threats against the lives of everyone I held dear. I did what was necessary to protect my family and my people. What does "what was necessary" mean? It means that Marco is no longer a danger to anyone. And it means that Victor has spent every day of the last 5 years plotting to destroy me as his form of revenge. I study his face, searching for any hint of a lie. I look for the monster that Victor described with such venom, but all I can find is a man burdened by an impossible weight, a man forced to make impossible decisions in a life that has no simple solutions. Why did you not tell me any of this sooner? Because I needed you to get to know me first, the person I truly am, not the twisted caricature painted by my enemies. And who is the person you truly are? He raises my hands to his lips and gently kisses my knuckles, just as he did on that very first night we met outside my building. I am a man who has been forced to do very difficult things. I am a man who has certainly made his share of mistakes, but I am also a man who would gladly set the entire world on fire if it meant keeping you safe. That is who I am, Eleonora. Everything else you hear is nothing more than noise. I desperately want to believe him. I want to have faith that the love I feel growing inside me is not completely misguided, that the man I am falling so hard for is worthy of my trust. But trust is not a gift that can just be handed over. It has to be constructed, piece by painstaking piece, through consistent actions over time. Then prove it to me, I say quietly. Show me the real you. And so he does. The weeks that come after are a complete revelation. Dominic carefully pulls back the curtain on his world in ways I had never imagined, showing me the completely legitimate companies he operates in parallel with his more shadowy dealings. I see real estate ventures that are transforming neglected neighborhoods into vibrant places for people to live. I tour import businesses that supply goods from all over the globe. I meet executives at investment firms that are funding innovative startups and creating thousands of jobs. Not everything I am involved in is against the law, he clarifies during a walkthrough of one of his massive construction sites. As a matter of fact, the majority of it is perfectly legal. The other activities are a necessity, for the time being. For the time being. I am building toward a different goal, Elena. A future where my family no longer has to rely on the old methods to prosper. But a transition of that magnitude requires a great deal of time. It demands patience, meticulous planning, and sometimes very difficult compromises. I finally start to grasp the sheer complexity of his life. He is not just a crime boss or just a chief executive officer. He is a man trapped between two entirely different worlds, fighting to forge a path that can respect his family's history while creating a brand new future. And he is asking me to be a central part of that future. I honestly never thought I would meet someone like you, he admits to me one night as we are lying together, watching the city sparkle through the enormous penthouse windows. I had come to terms with the idea that my life would always be a solitary one, that a woman who could truly comprehend my world simply did not exist. Maybe she still does not understand all of it. Maybe she is still figuring it out. That is enough for me. It is more than enough. His hand closes over mine in the dimly lit room, his fingers lacing through mine. I feel the calloused texture of his skin, the faint lines of scars that hold stories he has not yet told me. And I realize, in that moment, that I am not scared of those stories anymore. I want to hear every single one, but I am learning that peace is a fragile commodity in Dominic's life, and it can be shattered in an instant, without any warning at all. It all comes crashing down on a Tuesday. I am at the foundation offices, looking over applications for our latest scholarship initiative, when Patricia summons me to her office. Elena, we must have a word. Her face is a mask of professional neutrality, but I have been her employee long enough to sense the anxiety simmering just below the surface. Of course. What is this regarding? She begins. I have come into possession of some information concerning your personal affairs. A knot of dread forms in my stomach. What sort of information are you talking about? Certain questions have been brought to my attention about your associations. More specifically, your romantic involvement with a man by the name of Dominic Valente. It is Dominic's family name. I have only heard him use it on rare occasions, as he prefers to go by his first name alone in most settings. But clearly, someone has been investigating me. I fail to see how my private relationships are in any way relevant to the work I do here. Under normal circumstances, they would not be. But the Hartwell Foundation's entire existence is built upon its public reputation. We simply cannot risk being associated with certain kinds of people. Certain kinds of people. Patricia shifts in her chair, clearly uncomfortable. I have been presented with documentation that strongly suggests Mr. Valente has deep connections to organized criminal enterprises. If these allegations are accurate, your continued role here at the Foundation could present a significant threat to our public standing. I feel the room begin to shrink around me. Everything I have dedicated my life to, the career I built from the ground up, the professional respect I fought so hard to earn, all of it is now jeopardized because I dared to love a man society deems unacceptable. Who provided you with this documentation? I am not permitted to disclose that, she says, but I do not need her to. It is Victor Moretti. He is no longer satisfied with attacking Dominic head-on. Now, he is targeting anyone and anything that Dominic holds dear. I need some time to handle this, I say, my voice remaining surprisingly steady through sheer determination. Can you allow me until the end of this week? Patricia thinks it over for a long moment, and then she nods her head. You have until Friday. But Elena, if you are unable to make this problem go away, I will have no choice but to terminate your employment. I truly hope you can understand my position. I understand it with perfect clarity. I go back to my desk and begin to pack up my belongings with robotic movements. Jennifer, my coworker, gives me a look filled with concern, but refrains from asking any questions. I offer her no explanation. The moment I step out onto the busy street, I dial Dominic's secure private line. Elena, what is it? What happened? We have to talk. Immediately. 1 hour later, I am in his office, pacing back and forth across the expensive rug as he silently absorbs my retelling of the meeting with Patricia. When I finally fall silent, his face is a mask of pure fury. Victor, he growls, his voice low and dangerous. This has his name written all over it. Our lives completely. His goal is to push me away from everything I know, to make me feel so alone that I have no choice but to rely on him. But I refuse to let that happen. How can you be so certain? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Dominic stood up from his seat and walked over to me. He placed his hands firmly on my shoulders, his grip compelling me to look directly into his eyes. Because I will never allow it. Victor made a critical mistake. He believes that hurting you will make me vulnerable, but he has no idea how much you matter to me. He cannot possibly comprehend that I would set his entire world on fire before I let him cause you any harm. The raw power in his words was nearly terrifying. Yet, looking past that blazing anger, I recognized something else in his gaze. It was fear. He was terrified of losing me, a fear that mirrored. I was terrified of losing the life I had worked so hard to build. "What is your plan?" I asked him. "I am going to do what I should have done a long time ago. I am going to finish this for good." In the 3 days that followed, I witnessed a complete change in Dominic. The gentle man who brought me my morning coffee and left soft kisses on my brow was gone. In his place was someone with a steely edge, a man who was colder and intensely focused. He was constantly in meetings with unfamiliar men, their voices a low murmur of fast-paced Italian as they made strategies I was not allowed to hear. I offered to assist in any way I could, but he shut me down. "This is my battle, Eleanor. I am the one who exposed you to this threat, and I will be the one to eliminate it. The only thing I need from you is your trust." And so, I trusted him. I waited. Then, on Thursday evening, Dominic showed up at my door. The man before me looked completely drained. There were deep, dark shadows under his eyes, and his jaw was clenched with stress. But the moment his gaze landed on me, a subtle softness eased the tension in his face. "It is nearly finished," he told me. "It all ends tomorrow." My heart pounded. "What is scheduled for tomorrow?" "A meeting," he explained. "Victor and I are going to resolve this once and for all. Will it be dangerous?" The slight pause before he answered told me everything. "There is always a chance of danger, but I have taken every possible precaution. My men are ready for anything. I need to be there with you." He immediately shook his head. "No, absolutely not. Dominic, I cannot just stay here doing nothing while you knowingly step into a dangerous situation. I have to go. I need to see for myself that you are okay. The single best way for me to ensure your safety is to keep you as far from Victor as possible. I am not." It began with an injustice, a moment I was made to feel completely powerless. At a glittering gala, surrounded by influential people, I was invisible. They looked right through me as if I were part of the scenery. This is a story about how true power protects the vulnerable, and it will make you reconsider what real strength is. Stay with me to learn how one man who saw what others ignored changed the course of my life. The air was thick with the scent of money, but I felt utterly alone. Every smile I offered was met with a blank, dismissive stare. My presence was an inconvenience, a ghost at their feast. The weight of their disregard pressed down, making my shoulders ache with a deep exhaustion. I clutched my glass, its cool surface an anchor in a sea of indifference. Fear coiled in my gut, whispering that I did not belong. A family resemblance that clearly marked them as relatives. But the similarities ended there. While Dominic's eyes were a warm slate gray, Victor's were the color of glacial ice, utterly empty of any emotion. "Cousin," Victor greeted them, getting to his feet with a slow, deliberate motion. "And the beautiful Miss Price. I must admit, I am surprised to see her with you." "Eleanor is with me now," Dominic stated plainly. "It is her right to be present for what is about to unfold." A smile spread across Victor's face, but it held no warmth at all. "So very romantic. But answer me this, Miss Price. Has Dominic told you the real reason for this gathering? Has he mentioned the legacy founded on deceit? Or the stain of blood that covers his own hands? He told me what was real, I answered, forcing my voice to remain even and strong. That is far more than you have ever been capable of. Victor's cold eyes narrowed at my words. The truth, he mused. A fascinating idea. Why do we not find out if your beloved Dominic is prepared to reveal all of it? He reached inside his coat, produced a thick file, and threw it onto the table with a loud smack. Inside that folder is proof of every single thing you have done. Every secret contract, every rival removed, every life you have ruined. I am curious how your new lady will feel about you when she sees the monster you truly are. Dominic's expression remained unchanged. I have never pretended to be someone I am not, Victor. What separates you and me is that I own the consequences of my actions. You, on the other hand, wrap yourself in self-pity and point your finger at the world for your own shortcomings. My shortcomings? Victor spat. You stole my entire life. The leadership that was my birthright, the wealth, the power, and the respect. Then, you had my own brother killed when he dared to challenge you for it. Marco chose his path, Dominic countered, his voice like ice. He chose a path of bloodshed, and he received the same in return. The pressure in the warehouse became almost suffocating. I could see men on both sides subtly adjusting their positions, their hands drifting closer to hidden firearms. The entire scene was a powder keg waiting for a spark. And then, Victor started to laugh, a cold, empty sound. You know what I find truly amazing? Even now, you honestly believe you are in charge here. You actually see yourself as the good guy in all of this. He shook his head with mock pity. But that is not who you are. You are a monster, just like me, Dominic. And all monsters get what is coming to them. He snapped his fingers, and the entire atmosphere of the warehouse changed in an instant, exploding with motion. Armed men seemed to pour out from every dark corner, far more than I had first seen. They formed a tight circle around us. Dominic's guards responded instantly, pulling their own guns, but it was clear they were hopelessly outmatched. Did you honestly believe I came to this place to talk? Victor sneered. This was never a negotiation. This was always about bringing your time at the top to a permanent end. In a swift move, Dominic shoved me behind him, using his own body as a shield. Eleanor, when I give the word, you flee. You made a promise. I am not going to leave you here, and you are not going to die for me. The tense silence that followed felt like it stretched for an hour, though it could have only been a few heartbeats. My own pulse thundered in my ears, and a cold dread seized my chest. This was the end. I was sure this was how it was all going to end. But then, the main doors of the warehouse crashed open with explosive force. A squad of men in full tactical armor stormed into the space, their movements efficient and perfectly coordinated. They did not belong to Dominic, and they were not with Victor. They were a completely different force. FBI, get on the ground now! The command echoed through the building. The scene erupted into total pandemonium, a confusing storm of yelling and frantic action. Victor's ambushers broke formation, some threw down their weapons and surrendered, while others made a desperate run for it. Dominic quickly pulled me to the floor behind the heavy table, sheltering me with his body, while federal agents secured the area. When the noise finally died down, I cautiously raised my head. I saw Victor Moretti, his hands cuffed behind his back, being forced toward an official car. His face was a contorted mask of pure rage and utter shock. What just happened? I whispered, my voice shaking. Dominic helped me stand up. His face showed a mixture of emotions. There was clear relief, but also something else I could not immediately place. I arranged an agreement, he explained in a low voice. I did it weeks ago. I knew Victor would not rest until one of us was dead, so I contacted some people I know in the government. I gave them Victor, his entire network, everything. In return, I secured guaranteed protection for you and an opportunity to move my own enterprises into completely legal operations. You gave him up to the authorities. It was the only path forward, that did not end in more bloodshed, he insisted. Victor was relentless. He would have continued to endanger you and anyone else I hold dear. With this solution, he is imprisoned for many years, and I am free to create the new life I have been planning. I could only look at him in wonder. This complicated man who had managed to astonish me time and time again. A man who had ultimately chosen a quiet life over absolute control, who valued love more than power, and who looked toward the future instead of being chained to his history. You went through all of this for my sake. I did all of this for our sake, he corrected softly. For the future we can build with each other. A future that I desire more than anything in this world. Warm tears began to flow freely down my cheeks, and I made no effort to wipe them away. I launched myself into his arms, clinging to him tightly, as if he might vanish into thin air. I love you, I breathed into his shirt. I love you, Dominic. His embrace grew even stronger. I love you too, Eleanor, he said, his voice thick with emotion. More than I ever imagined I could. Beyond our small circle, the night was a chaotic scene of flashing emergency lights and the sharp commands of federal agents. But right there, held in each other's arms, we were protected, we were secure, At long last, we were home, a full 6 months after that night. Then, a man detached himself from the shadows. He radiated a quiet danger, yet he approached me. He was the only one who had truly looked at me all night. His name was Dominic. He saw me with an intensity that was both frightening and thrilling. He told me he had watched for an hour as I handled the room's silent cruelty with grace. In that instant, my fear gave way to an unfamiliar feeling of safety. That one moment of kindness led me into a world of darkness. It was Dominic's world. We soon found ourselves heading to an abandoned warehouse to meet Victor Moretti, a man who mirrored Dominic's power but was twisted by cruelty. I learned then that the system I trusted was a lie. People like my old boss, Patricia, were protected by men like Victor. There were countless other victims, silenced by a corrupt network. The system had failed. It is truly incredible. He gives me a smile, and it still possesses the power to completely transform his features. The severe hardness that once characterized him has gradually softened over these last few months, and something much warmer has taken its place. He is still an incredibly powerful man, and absolutely formidable when the situation demands it. But he is also unfailingly gentle, remarkably patient, and completely devoted to me. I have a little something for you, he says, his hand slipping into the pocket of his jacket. My heart does a little flip. Dominic, do not even think about it. It is not a ring. He stops for a moment, and his smile gets even wider. Not quite yet. He pulls out a small box covered in black velvet and opens it, revealing a stunningly delicate pendant. It is a silver butterfly, its wings intricately set with dozens of tiny diamonds that glitter in the afternoon sun. A butterfly, I say in a whisper. You came out of, but justice can be a quiet thing. That night, everything changed. Victor Moretti's empire began to collapse, dismantled by federal prosecutors using information Dominic provided. His power was stripped away, his protection gone. My own justice followed. I walked away from the foundation and the woman who enabled so much pain. With Dominic's help, I created a new path, a foundation giving children the chances I never had. It was a new beginning built from a necessary end. We learned that real power is not about dominance, but protection. Dominic used his strength to shield me, then to tear down a corrupt system. We realized silence allows harm to thrive, and speaking up is an act of incredible courage. We also found that justice can come from imperfect people. On a park bench, he told me his plans for a family, saying every honest deal he now made was to build a home filled with the love we never had. Hope started to feel real. Sitting in the park, our dog Darcy asleep at our feet, I squeezed his hand. You gave me permission to dream again, Dominic, I whispered. And in my dreams, you are always there. The city bloomed around us with the colors of spring, reflecting the new life we were building. He pulled me close, his arm a familiar comfort. We watched boats drift across the water, a quiet symbol of the peaceful life we had fought so hard to create. "You saw something in me I could not see in myself," I said. He just shook his head. "I only showed you what was always there." We sat in a comfortable silence, taking in an ordinary afternoon. Families on blankets, children playing. These simple moments felt extraordinary because we were sharing them. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For what?" he asked. "For watching me. For waiting. For approaching a woman standing all alone." "Thank you," he answered, "for being brave enough to say yes." I thought about the fear and uncertainty, the shocking revelations, and the times I wondered if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I recalled how close we came to losing one another and the obstacles we faced. None of it matters now because we are here, together. We are building something beautiful and strong from the ashes of our broken pasts. I now know the greatest love can begin in the most unexpected moment, that being truly seen by the right person changes everything. Grace under pressure is not weakness, it is a profound strength. Home is not a place on a map. Home is the person who chooses you, protects you, and loves you exactly as you are. I have found my home, and I am never letting go. If you have watched this far, this story touched you. Leave a comment saying, "I watched this far." If this story resonated, please give it a like and share it. Your support helps us create more stories that remind you second chances are always possible. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next story. Thank you for being here. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to bring you meaningful stories and valuable life lessons. Thank you for being part of our journey.